interstate rest area, and truck stop employees. What's the most bizarre story you have? Not an employee, but a frequent cross-country traveler. Weirdest was pulling up to a truck stop to fill up in southeastern South Dakota during the height of the mayfly hatch. Millions of bugs all over. I started filling up and was getting ready to clean my windshield, and I happened to look over across the way, and there was some dude driving a big box truck in the diesel fueling area. He was scraping them off the front of his truck and eating them by the handfuls. Ah, the days before cell phones were a thing. Story 2. My friends and I went into a busy Japanese restroom at a tourist area. Aside from urinals, there were maybe 10 stalls and all occupied with 2 people waiting for each stall. I think tour buses had just dropped off. Aside from the occasional flush and sink sounds, the restroom is relatively quiet. No one is talking on phones or to each other. I'd say 30 people were in the restroom using or waiting on the facilities. One guy is aggressive farting and shooting loud nuggets into the bowl while grunting and panning. It's comically loud and abusive. Remember, this is Japan and everyone is politely ignoring the thunderous sounds of defection. I'm trying so hard not to laugh. I hear a single snicker from another stall and then I begin giggling loudly, snorting and such after I tried so hard to stay silent. Like cell phones ringing one by one in a disaster movie press room. Laughter spreads through the room as each person experiences exactly the same silliness. In a split second, the room erupts in way louder laughter than one would expect because everyone was trying so hard not to laugh. Other people laughing only made it more hysterical. When I came out of my stall, everyone was all smiles. Not one person waiting for a stall looked annoyed. Each of us in that room shared a bond over toilet humor which reached beyond nationality, age, or language. We experienced an immediate brotherhood, and I will never forget it. Story 3. Years ago when I was a kid, we were traveling with my mom, her best friend, and my sisters. We were pretty tired and pulled into a truck stop for some food and bathroom break. We walk in, my mom asks a guy where the bathrooms were. He points us in the right direction, and off we toddle. We come out, take a seat, and wait for the waitress to come take our order. She seems to be taking a while, but we figure she's probably busy and will come when she can. Eventually, she comes over and tells my mom that everything is okay, and the police are on their way. My mom, pretty confused, asks her what she means. Well, turns out we had walked into the middle of an armed robbery, and my mom had actually asked the robber where the toilets were. Story 4. Not one anymore, but when I was a maintenance worker for a truck stop, I got a call over the radio saying there were 2 women in the parking lot covered in chocolate. I thought, well, as long as they don't come into the store. I went outside to find 2 women, completely naked, covered in a brown substance. I hope to God it was chocolate. The sheriff was called, and apparently, they were both completely sober. There for a sorority thing. They were issued a ticket, and it was indeed chocolate. Another one was a woman came to the counter and said someone stole her car. We called the sheriff, and while we waited, I found she parked her car in the parking lot way in the back while she went to a nearby city with some girlfriends. When the sheriffs arrived, they couldn't find a trace of her car, broken window, skid marks, etc., and assumed someone must have had a key or the door was open. Picked. He did some investigating around the spot and found her car in the ravine she was parked next to. Apparently, a truck backed up, didn't know it hit something, and pushed it off the embankment. Took 2 wreckers to pull it out. The person who pushed it off was never found. Story 5. I worked overnights at a tuck stop and nights at a truck shop for a combined 10 years. When your stint was as long as that, bizarre means less and less. I've been propositioned by lot lizards, both attractive and not. Propositioned by truckers, male and female. Lost count of the piss jugs I've had to throw out. Seen the boss getting busy with the help. Seen substances deals and substances busts, petty thefts, and a truck crash into a diesel pump which left me smelling like fuel for a week. I also gained a short-lived stalker who settled for a guy with the same name, similar dress style, identical hair and beard style, with near identical likes, because if she couldn't have me, she'd settle for the next best thing. But what sticks out most are the following 2 instances. The first was when my town got from 7 to 11 inches of rainfall in a day. Our shop sat on the corner of an intersection, and myself and the technicians watched as idiot after idiot tried to get across the clearly flooded street, even with other cars flooded out and serving as warning signs. Also outside our shop were massive drainage ditches, and as the flooding got so bad that the ditches were full, the water started pulling cars into the ditches. An older woman got sucked into one of the eddies, and one brave mechanic raced out to save her. He dove into the churning water, pulled her out of her car, and got her to safety. When he came back, he had an utterly defeated look on his face. We asked him what happened, and he said, "She yelled at me for not saving her groceries." The other was while I was employed at the truck stop. A friend and I were smoking outside and chatting with a non-stereotypical trucker. We'd been shooting the breeze for 10 minutes or so when he asked, "Y'all got any strip clubs around here?" I said yes and started giving instructions on how to get to the first when he interrupted me. "I'm not looking for any good-looking women. I want them that are messed up looking. I likes them ugly. I looked at my friend and we laughed, clearly thinking it was a joke. It was not. The trucker got a little red and angry. I'm serious. I want them. My buddy and I laughed harder, and the driver walked away, cussing us all the way to his truck. I didn't mean to kink shame the guy, but damn if it wasn't funny. Story 6. I worked at a gas station, truck stop, for over a year in high school. I have lots of stories. So one time I'm closing up the station. I was starting to count the till before I turn on the security system and leave. I've got a wad of 20s when 4 cop cars come ripping into our lot. I run to the windows, 2 cops go to the back, and the other 2 position at the corners where it's hard to see them through the windows. Now I'm an idiot high schooler, so I'm trying to look out the window grasping $300 and 20 years old when I realize they've got weapons drawn and are trying to look at me. I put my hands up, cash in hand, and start yelling that I'm an employee. They let me unlock the door and come in. They were nice, but clearly frustrated that I set off the alarm. I tell them 5 times that the alarm was not set, but they insist that I'm wrong and that they had a clear security report. So I took them to the panel, verified it was off. Then my smarts kick in. Hey guys, what address was the alarm for? 303 Baker. Why? That's not our address. That's ABC Supply a block north. They moved quickly to that business. I heard later that the safe was taken from that supply store. Story 7. I worked at a weigh station for big rigs. There were 2 of us at the station working nights waiting for trucks to pull onto the scale. If anything weighing more than a pound got on the scale, it would send an audible beep into the booth and light up the computers. If it wasn't a truck's, then most of the time it would be the wildlife wandering out onto the scale, which we would ignore, then quickly go back to watching Netflix or whatever. One night, though, it was something weighing 132 pounds. We couldn't see it from the windows, but checking the cameras, we noticed it was a hunched-over naked man, shaking like a crafting dog and scratching the side of his face. While my coworker radioed for the state troopers, I used the intercom to tell him to get off of the scale. Instead, he lurched on over and began licking the window. He did this until he was checked out by ambulance workers and taken away by law enforcement for public intoxication. It was later discovered he was using meth. Story 8. I managed a truck stop an hour east of Winnipeg in the late 90s. This was around the time that Western Star came out with their one-way full window bunk. We had a regular base of clientele that would stop both ways. Surprise to no one of the regulars became enamored with one of the waitresses. She had complained to me about this driver 2 weeks before, and I assured her I would deal with it if he continued to make her uncomfortable. On his return trip, he stopped in. I watched, saw nothing untoward. He ate, and then left for his truck. As the Western Star full window bunk has been mentioned, he was parked right in front of the restaurant's bay window. I am back in the kitchen helping with prep, and I hear my name called, and then I hear my name called. I walk out, look out the window, and see the sun hitting the bunk window of this truck at just the right angle to witness this dude pleasure himself so damn hard. All the while, he's staring straight at the waitress through the window of the restaurant. Before I could react, he realized that we could see him, jumped in the saddle, pants around his ankles, and hightailed it onto the highway. I think he must have grabbed 5 gears inside 20 feet, getting it going. We never saw him again. Story 9. I didn't work there, but I was at a truck stop in West Virginia where a very fat trucker was trying to buy a Twix bar from the vending machine. He paid for it, but the bar got stuck on the last loop of the dispenser. So the trucker starts shaking the machine. Don't try this ever. And it comes toppling down onto his legs, pinning him to the floor. Ah, damn, he says nonchalantly. Everyone hears the crash and comes rushing over to help while a worker calls 911. It's at this point the trucker realizes that the glass on the machine is broken, so he reaches between his legs under the machine, feels around, and grabs a Twix bar from the machine. This dude just lies there, completely unconcerned about being pinned to the floor, and starts eating the candy. A worker says he should try to stay still until help arrives, but the trucker responds with, "Duck off, I paid for it already." By the time the fire department arrived and pried the vending machine off of him, this idiot had eaten all the Twix bars in the machine as well as some Doritos and cookies. An emergency employers brought out a stretcher to take this guy to the ambulance, but the trucker says he has a deadline to meet and that the ambulance won't be necessary. He gets up, somehow relatively unscathed, hands the worker $20 and says, "Thanks for dinner, bro," then hops in his truck and leaves. Story 10. My dad retold me a story that my grandpa told him today. We're guessing this took place in the 70s. My grandpa knew these 2 antique dealers. They were husband and wife. They drove themselves from a neighboring state to Texas to look for more stuff to bring back to their antique store. While they were in between towns, they stopped at a rest stop, eating lunch, looking at the map so they can decide where to go next. Standard stuff. There was only them and 1 semi-truck. The driver of the truck approached them saying, "Hey, my truck's broken down and I've been stuck out here for hours. I could really use your help. I need to replace this part, and if you take me there, then I can get a taxi to bring me back." "Yeah, sure, no problem." So they're in the van again, the husband's driving, wife's in the passenger seat, and the truck driver in the back. When they pull out of the rest stop, the man in the back pulls a gun on the husband and says he wants their money. They kept most of their money in their glove box, so the wife reaches in with both hands. Money in one hand, a gun in the other. She hands the truck driver the money, and while he's distracted by the amount they had on them, she slid the gun into her husband's lap. I believe the husband turned around and shot the truck driver a couple of times, and the truck driver shot the husband. The truck driver passed away, and the husband lived. So now they're in between towns. The husband has been shot. They have a dead man in the back seat, and now they have to find a hospital. An hour or so later, they find an emergency room, and the wife says, "I need you to help my husband because he's been shot, and I need you to call the police because the man who shot him is dead in the back of my van." So they take care of the husband. The police show up. They drag the body out. The wife explains the whole situation. The police go to the rest stop to check the inside of the semi. The actual truck driver was shot dead and was put back in the truck. They think that the robber didn't know how to drive it, so they waited at the rest stop, hoping someone would pull up in something he did know how to drive. So this is a story from my 90-year-old grandpa, so I don't know how much he's telling tales or how much this story has been exaggerated over the years. Either way, it was crazy to listen to. Story 11. Overnight shift supervisor 15 years ago. On Valentine's Day, then 18 years old, I was the only lonely idiot shift supervisor to be able to work Secode shift at McDonald's rest area because, again, lonely with no date. I'm half asleep working the shift. Guy comes in high. He orders his food and leaves. An hour later, my cleaning guy, we'll call him Pedro, tells me there's a guy on the toilet that won't come out. We go in, keep knocking, and we're thinking he's sleeping on the crapter. We can see his pants around his ankles and he's leaning down. While I go call the cops, I tell my cleaning guy to block the bathroom so no one goes into that part of it. There's two sides to the bathroom. Pedro comes out and tells me the guy is purple and dead on the crapter. He overdosed on something, not sure what. The kicker is that Pedro decided it was in his best interest to run the guy's pockets before the cops show up, which is how he found out the guy was passed away. Pedro took the guy's stash and money before leaving. I found out a week later as I overheard it through the crew talking. Fun times at that place. Felt bad for the guy. I wouldn't want to go out that way. Story 12. I used to work at a video poker room in a truck stop. A guy comes in, already so sloppy drink that he can barely walk, thrusts a 44-ounce foam cup in my face and tells me to fill it with whiskey. I tell him, first, that would be $88. Second, I can't serve alcohol to someone who is already drunk. And third, I can't use an outside cup. He stops and stares at me for a moment, then thrusts the cup in my face and repeats himself. I tell him that it's not happening because I cannot for both legal and business policy reasons. He tries to get aggressive, but stumbles and falls over. So I tell the security guard, who is about as useful a coloring book to a blind person, to call the police. Get was watching the whole thing and couldn't be bothered to even get off of his stool to do anything. And then it happens. He pukes all over himself and the floor. When the cops arrive, we're all standing over this guy who is trying to get out of the puddle of puke and failing miserably, and is only succeeding in spreading it. The police decide to call an ambulance because he is far gone enough that he could have alcohol poisoning. I tell the security guard to go get some cat litter out of storage that we usually use to clean up fuel spills. Once he gets back, one of the cops got it in his head that we should take the guy out back and hose him off. So they put on rubber gloves and carefully half drag, half carry the guy outside, take everything out of his pockets, and use a hose to spray him off. So now he smells like alcoholic vomit, and spraying him off only made him smell worse because apparently he had soiled himself earlier and it had dried, so it didn't smell too terrible. Spraying him did wake him up though. So he starts trying to get up, but can't because he's sloppy drunk and isn't really coherent. The ambulance arrives, they strap him to the gurney and drive him off. The guy never came back to the video poker room, so I don't know if he survived. What I do know is that the cops were obviously disgusted by the whole thing because I could see one guy gagging from time to time when I took a look to see if everything was all right. Story 13? Funny. My son, daughter, best friend, and I all work at the same rest area. My son had a guy stay in the restroom for about 3 hours. When he finally left, there were 3 empty bottles of water and an empty bag of Teddy Grahams. Best friend found a dead trucker. No foul play. Just passed away of a heart attack and was there for so long, she checked on him. I was cleaning one of the women's restrooms one day and heard screaming from the lobby. Went out and a lady's jeans on her thigh were ripped to shreds and she had bruises in her thigh. Some guy had walked by her with a dog and the dog just lunged at her and grabbed her. She said the guy yelled at her for it and said she shouldn't have walked that close to the dog on a public sidewalk and left. She didn't have a description of him. Really didn't know what kind of car he got in or anything, but yeah, the guy just left. Then she didn't want to wait for police or an ambulance or anything, and I tried to talk her into at least going to the nearest doctor or emergency room. But no, she decided to drive on to her daughter's house like an hour. There was really nothing I could do to stop her, so I got her some bandages from our first aid kit and sent her on her way. It's usually pretty boring. A couple weeks ago, we had some plumbing issues, so we had no water at our rest area, or the one westbound across the interstate. but the dot says we aren't allowed to close. So we were going in after people and flushing toilets with a 5-gallon bucket from huge trash cans filled with water, until we ran out of water to flush with. And people were still using the restrooms. So glad I didn't have to work the cleanup for that. Imagine having to do that and having no water to wash your hands. During a pandemic, and I've seen more coworkers high on crap than truckers. Story 14. Not me, but my dad managed a truck stop for a year or so. At this truck stop, drivers could get a shower, but it's time since there are usually multiple people waiting to get one as well. One day, a guy is showering and his time is up, but he didn't come out. One of the employees knocked and requested he come out so the next person could shower, but still no response. They eventually entered the shower to find the man passed away. It turned out that he had suffered a major heart attack while he was in there. Another one, and apparently this is somewhat common, a truck transporting honeybees left the stop, but the queen from one of the hives had taken residence in or around the pump while the truck was stopped. They had to get a beekeeper out to capture and move the queen and her colony before they could let anyone near the fuel pumps. Story 15. I was on a ride-along when I worked for an international trucking company, and we pulled up at a large truck stop and had some dinner. After a while, this lady comes in and starts talking to people, and it turns out that she is looking for her 13-year-old daughter. She had run away from home and left a note saying that she was meeting a guy here, a trucker that she met on the internet. Long story short, everyone is talking about what they have seen, and the mother is barely keeping it together when a waitress comes in to start her shift. We bring her up to speed, and the first thing she says in front of the whole group is, "If you're looking for a body, did anyone check the dumpsters out back?" Needless to say, the mother then lost her crap, literally. She fell to the ground and crap and pissed herself and was ugly crying so hard you wouldn't believe it if you weren't there. Anyway, it turned out that the truck driver was a sweet guy who was told she was 22 years old and just needed a ride home because she was broke. He worked out. She was a child in about 1 second and took her directly to the nearest police station. Story 16. Pulled into the parking lot to go to work. I was an overnight cashier, usually the only one at the store. My shift started at 11 p.m. First thing I notice is the large group of people all huddled in the corner of the parking lot, closest to the interstate. Next thing, an ambulance and cop cars everywhere. No lights or sirens, which is why I hadn't noticed them first. I pull into my usual parking spot, keeping my eye on the group of people. There was at least 20 people, and my manager is one of them. As I open the door to get out, I hear, "Drop the gun, get on the ground." Here's where I should let you know that I'm not a smart person, apparently. I also have severe tunnel vision, apparently. My first thought is not, "Oh crap, who has a gun? I should stay here and wait." No, my first and only thought is, I don't have a gun. And I keep walking. Where do I walk? Good question. I walk in between the person holding the gun and the two cops situated about 10 feet away, guns drawn. Now, the guy was running away, but it all happened so fast that I didn't realize they were that close until after it has already happened. The cops don't say anything to me because the dude has decided in that moment to surrender. Gun is on the ground, cops are on his back as I'm walking over to the group of people. There's a man laying on the ground screaming in agony with a hole through his ankle. He was taking his friend to rehab. They decided to get high one last time. That's when the friend decided he didn't really want to go to rehab and shot his friend in the leg. 3 hours after everything is over, I realize I could have been shot and have a severe panic attack beside the coffee machines. Story 17. I'm not an employee, but I once witnessed a squirrel run into the women's room. It was one of those outdoor rest area bathrooms with no door that you turn into the building around a corner. And then like 20 women come out running for their lives and screaming 10 seconds later. It was like something out of a movie. Story 18. What about something non-employees witnessed? I entered the men's room at a rest stop and saw a trucker fully nude in front of the sinks, giving himself a bath, soaped up and rinsing himself off one hand scoop of water at a time. I feel bad for whoever had to clean that up afterwards. Story 19. As a man that has reached the ripe old age of 48 years old, I can promise you I've seen some crap go down. This one totally takes the cake for me, though. I was waiting out front of a truck stop back in the mid-'80s, sitting on a park bench with a guy that had a big Rottweiler kind of dog on a leash with him. I tried to make small talk, but he was quite a sourpuss. So we sat in silence for a few minutes until the most unexpected thing I've ever seen happened right before my very eyes. While we were sitting there, a big 18-wheeler pulls in without a trailer, bobtail. So he parks right up front like a normal car would. Inside the cab of the truck with the driver is a little monkey. The dance for the organ grinder kind. I think they're called rhesus monkeys, perhaps. Well, the dog spots this lil monkey and proceeds to go apcrap over it, lunging at the end of his leash and barking at the top of his lungs, generally making a real spectacle of himself, to say the least. The driver is obviously upset, but not nearly as much as the monkey is. Actually, upset may be the wrong adjective to use for the monkey, though. In retrospect, I think eagerly aggressive may be a more appropriate description for his disposition. He was pacing the dashboard back and forth, never taking his eyes off of this very aggravating dog. The driver opens his little triangle window that they don't make on cars anymore, the ones made for smokers back in the day. He yells out to this douchebag to call his dog off because it is upsetting his monkey. The guy laughs and says, "No way. I told you he was a git, didn't I?" Says that his dog isn't bothering nobody. The dog hasn't shut up since he laid eyes on the monkey. I promise you he is bothering everybody for several blocks around. Now here's where things start to get interesting. The driver says that if he doesn't call his dog off, he's going to let his monkey loose on that dog. Douchebag laughs and says that his dog would eat that monkey alive. Upon hearing this, the driver leans over and reaches into his glove box, I guess. Pulls out one of those tiny baseball bats like you used to get at Astro World or carnivals, and places it in the monkey's hand. The monkey obviously knows what's about to go down because he is now trying to squeeze out of that little triangular window I mentioned earlier. This monkey has murder in his eyes if I have ever seen it. Driver hollers, "Last chance to save your dog, man." In response, douchebag lets his dog off of the leash. Now we have a situation that has escalated to the point where we have a dog jumping up at the window and a monkey screaming profanities right back at him. Well, the driver finally rolls down the regular window and out leaps all kinds of miniature primate hell. The dog never knew what hit him. Quick as a flash, this monkey is riding on the back of this dog's neck. His two back feet all wrapped up in his neck fur, with one hand hanging onto an ear. The other hand, as you may have guessed by now, is steadily and mercilessly raining down blows about this dog. Well, it only took a moment for the dog to realize he was in way over his head. I mean, this dog is running so damn hard he's throwing up tufts of grass and dirt as soon as he leaves pavement. The monkey still riding him and beating on him the whole time. Douchebag acts like he wants to fight now. But several people, including myself, stepped in to stop that nonsense. In a couple of minutes or so, the little monkey comes loping back with his little bat still in hand, and leaps up into the still open window of the truck to await his master who has gone on into the store. That ran off to try to go find his dog, but I don't know if he ever did. My ride showed up and I had to go. Never again in this lifetime will I see something so totally crazy and unexpected like that. I am both fortunate and humbled to have been so privileged to be present for such an event. Story 20? Not an employee of one, but a friend of mine from high school, and I were cruising the back roads of our town and having a good time listening to music and just cruising. We decided to stop off at the truck stop in one of the towns we had ended up in and get some food and drinks. Suddenly, she comes up to me excited and freaking out. I ask her what's wrong, and she tells me she just seen Lance Bass and go into the men's restroom. I tell her I honestly doubt that considering this was a small rural town truck stop, and it's 1 a.m. So we get our food and sit in her car parked at the front of the entrance. As we're eating, a solid 45 minutes has gone by and I tell her she must be seeing crap. Then suddenly the door opens and sure as crappets was Lance Bass. She rolls down the window and screams, "I love you, Lance." And he turns around and smiles and waves at her. Proceeded to walk over to a large unmarked tour bus and get on it, then leave. That was a crazy night. Story 21. Not an employee, but once at a rest stop in North Carolina, a dude came up to me and asked me for gas money. This is 2003, and I was driving a 1994 Saturn. He said, "Hey man, I can tell by your car you don't have a lot of money, but can you spare a couple of bucks for gas?" Hey, damn you, man. I didn't give him any money. Story 22? I have tons of these stories. I worked management for truck stop restaurants for over a decade. One time while working overnight, a whole SWAT team goes flying through the parking lot to the back lot, including a large black truck. Apparently, a woman had run naked across the parking lot into the shop area where the mechanics hid her and called the police. She had been kidnapped in Oklahoma. That same week, another woman was waiting for the bus, Greyhound stop. Someone kidnapped her and took her down to the river, abused her, and brought her back. Both stories were run in the paper and sales dropped dramatically, which I had fun explaining to my boss. One Christmas Eve, my cook was out front having a cigarette, I thought, when his ex-wife pulled up and they had an argument. She drove her car into the building with their 12-year-old inside the car. Cook comes back in and is cooking, but asking me to call the police because his 12-year-old was in the car. But I notice he's limping. She had hit him, and he was trying to play it off so she wouldn't get in trouble. Probably also in shock. Bystanders said he bounced off the windshield about 3 feet in the air. One of my waitresses always parked in the same area and noticed a car had been there over a week without moving. Call PD. Passed away woman in the back who died in her sleep. Someone left a very nice, expensive sports car in the parking lot of another store I worked at in Albuquerque. Not a place to leave a nice car, it was also tarped over with a car cover. It was there for over a week, so me and another manager went to investigate. Putrid smell coming from inside the trunk area. The wind had blown the tarp, and we could see inside was super clean and a new car, temp tags. Only thing inside the car was a Bible in the back seat. Called PD, car was picked up. Judging from the horrible smell and the cops questioning and wanting CCTV footage, I think there was a body in the trunk. Same place as last story. My manager was in questioning once again why sales were down and why we aren't able to keep a more family image. During this discussion, a man runs out of the showers next door completely naked and runs past every window in the restaurant before hiding behind some dumpsters and being overtaken by security. Proved my point without me having to say much. Different store. One of my waitresses was waiting on a man who kept crying randomly and putting his head down. Eventually tells her she needs to call an ambulance for him because he has meningitis and his partner just passed away from it and has passed away at their house. Had to close for cleaning and that server had to be tested. Story 23. Worked at a highway fast food place for about 8 years on and off. One story has always been my favorite. The night the mop was stolen by the high guy. The store was just outside a small town that day beside the highway. One night it was about 11 p.m. and it had been quiet for ages. We had started to shut down and clean the dining room. There was only me and one other person working. We had done about half and were taking a break having a chat behind the counter, killing time until we could officially shut and do the other half of the dining room. The front doors open and our immediate reaction is, ugh, customers. These customers stopped just inside the door and just stared. We realized they were locals and they were high as kites. One of them just stands in the doorway, looking around in stoned wonder. The other sees the mop bucket we had left out there in preparation for doing the other half of the dining room. He proceeds to pick up the mop, walk a lap around the restaurant, dragging it behind him on the floor, leaving a huge, wet, dirty trail. Then he and his mate turn and walk out the front door with the mop. It was one of those moments where you honestly don't know how to react. We just looked at each other and pissed ourselves laughing. We then discovered it was a huge problem. Turns out that was our only mop. We had to leave the floor dirty. Worst part was the restaurant manager was doing open the next morning. We left notes everywhere explaining what happened. But I still got a call at 5 a.m. getting me out for leaving the store in such a state, even though she was the reason we didn't have a second mop. Too expensive, apparently. No one believed us, and we didn't have security cameras to back us up. Fast forward about 6 weeks. One of the locals comes to work, thankfully when my manager and me were both working. And he walks in carrying a mop, the mop that had been stolen. He found it in the bushes on the back path from the rest stop to the town. Even now, almost 20 years later, I'm friends with the guy I was working with, and we often reminisce about the night the stoned guys stole our mop. So random. Up there with the night the cat got stuck in my engine. Story 24. I've been working at a truck stop Burger King for about 2 years now. The pay is decent for a teenager such as myself, but the experiences at my location have been rather odd at times. The most bizarre thing that I've had happen at work goes as follows. I'm in the kitchen making chicken nuggets for an order, when all of a sudden 3 police cars pull up, an ambulance, and 2 fire trucks. The police sergeant and fire chief come over rather frantically to the front desk and tell us that we need to evacuate the location within 10 minutes, or a potential chemical threat could either blow us up or poison us. Now you might be asking what the chemical threat was. We don't know. Still, to this day, we do not know. All the information that we were given was that a tanker truck with some pretty hazardous chemicals pulled in and flipped over and began to leak. The weirdest part of this is that the driver was missing and the truck was seemingly abandoned. The cops did a full investigation with CCTV footage and nobody was able to locate the driver or even identify the guy, mainly because nobody saw who he was or where he went. After about 5 minutes of throwing everything away and making sure I've gotten my stuff and clocked out, I see 2 white vans pull up and out come 6 guys in hazmat suits. They all sprint over to the truck yard and the cops are blocking it off and evacuating the rest of us out of the building and parking lot. Not sure what exactly it was that happened, but I sure as hell wish the drone footage I captured with my friends D and B after I got off showed more. Story 25. I'm not an employee, but I had an odd encounter with someone who claimed to be one. When I was 19 years old, I was driving home to California via I-80 through Wyoming. It was getting late, and I was beyond tired. I pulled over to the side of the interstate, and I set my alarm for 15 minutes, so I could take a nap and then continue on to the next town. It's important to note that I normally wear contacts, but I had been wearing my glasses and I took them off to sleep. I can't read a sign 2 feet in front of myself without them. I fall asleep. I'm awoken by a tap on the window. I started feeling around for my glasses, but I knocked them to the floor of the car. A second knock. I thought it might be the police, even though I didn't see lights. I didn't know if it was legal to park on the side of the highway. I rolled down my window a couple of inches, but I couldn't see anything about this person without my glasses. They asked if everything was all right, and I said yes. I still thought this might law enforcement, so I was being respectful. But then he told me that he recognized me. I said, no, you don't. He said he worked up the road at a rest stop, gas station, and he had just seen me fill up my tank. I hadn't filled up in the entire state of Wyoming. I drove a yellow Beetle with some pretty significant damage to the rear bumper. He insisted he recognized my car. At this point, I knew he wasn't law enforcement, and I knew he was lying, so I started making my replies short. Then he asks if I want a ride. I say no. He offered to drive me to the nearest hotel. I said no. He was very insistent. Finally, I asked if I was doing anything wrong or illegal. He said no and left. Could have been a totally normal dude, but it freaks me out to think about it now, a few years later. The scariest thing about it to me is how I wouldn't have been able to go to police with a description if something had happened. Story 26. Very shortly after I started working at a travel center, before electronic logs, when it was much easier to cheat and drive more hours than allowed, I had a truck driver come in and ask me to call the local animal control officer. He explained he had picked up a large, severely injured, bleeding, and unconscious cat about 450 miles back, hoping it would live until he got to a lady friend's house. She worked for a vet and fostered and rehabbed many animals, and he thought if anyone could save it, it was her. He explained he had wrapped it in a towel and put it on the floor of his bunk area, so if it came to it would not roll off his bunk and further injure itself. He had stopped a couple of times to make sure it was still breathing, and it seemed to be holding on. About 100 from our location, he said it came around and started making noise. First, soft meows that became yowls and turned into loud screeching and hissing. The cat, still wrapped in the towel, was now as far under the bunk as possible, much bigger than he first thought, and hissing and swiping at him with huge claws every time he so much as approached the bunk. He didn't want to hurt it, but he wanted that demon cat out of his truck before it crapped, and pissed all over and ruined the cab and bunk of the truck. I called our local PD, and as animal control did not work around the clock, they sent an officer out. The driver told his story and handed his keys over to the officer, saying he wasn't going anywhere near the truck until the cat was gone. The officer agreed to check out the situation, and the driver stood outside and watched him. After a few minutes, he came back and saying even the cop needed backup for that devil cat, because other cops and the fire department were there. I thought that was strange, because I didn't see any other emergency vehicles or lights. A bit after that, the original officer came in and asked the driver to follow him. The driver followed him out, ribbing him about all the backup he needed for a cat. About 40 minutes after that, the officer came back in and told me driver would be staying there at least 12 hours, and if the truck moved even an inch before then, to call the PD immediately. I said, okay, and asked about the cat. The cop told me there was no cat. It didn't get out and run away. There had never been a cat. There was a beat-up, dirty, red and black striped towel wrapped in another towel on the floor, and that was it. The driver had not slept in several days because he got bonuses for getting hot loads in early, and he had been without enough sleep for so long that he had starting hallucinating. The black cat was actually the red and black striped towel, the breathing, all the cat noises, the slashing claws, and even the other cop cars and fire trucks were all hallucinations. The cop had written him a rather large ticket for violations and pulled the driver off the road to sleep. Then he spent a half hour convincing the driver that he imagined it all. He had to pick up and shake out the towel and have the driver touch it again. He even had to have the driver tell him where the fire truck was and then walk through it to prove it wasn't real before he believed him. To know someone driving 80,000 pounds of machine and load down the road had no grasp of reality for at least 450 miles scared and still scares the living hell out of me. Story 27. Not an employee, but I worked in a customer service call center for about 4 years, and every few months this man in California, if I remember right, would call and ask for coupons. Happens all the time, but every time he'd ask where we were located, when I'd say Iowa, he'd go on and on about how beautiful the rest areas are in Iowa. I mean, profusely complimenting our rest stops. I always got a weird vibe over the phone, but to my knowledge, he just really enjoyed them, apparently. I don't believe he was a truck driver. If I remember correctly, he drove cross-country once in the 90s, if not earlier. Story 28. Currently work at a small truck stop and weigh station. Frequently get comments on how small and how old-fashioned it is. Been working there a little over 2 years. I got a couple of odd balls. Was working graveyard one night. It was after 2 a.m. and I was getting increasingly tired. I had a driver come in to get fuel. He was in his pajamas and seemed really out of it. I welcomed him and looked down and saw that he appeared to have forgotten to tuck away his trouser snake. He started asking me how one goes about getting fuel at my station, and I kept looking at him, down at the trouser snake, and back up at him in hopes that he could get the hint. Eventually he noticed, and turned red-faced and tucked himself away. We couldn't maintain eye contact for the rest of the transaction. A little more on the store and the lot, there was a crap ton of potholes. Like an absurd amount. So many that we just need to get the whole lot repaved eventually. We get plenty of complaints about TVs and microwaves falling and breaking, which we usually respond with, "Why were you driving so fast?" We pretty much consider the potholes as speed bumps. One of the more recent ones had been a driver that had slipped and hurt himself in one, leading him to a hospital visit. Later in the day, we got a call in the store. I picked up, and it was the guy that had slipped. I had no prior knowledge of what had happened, so when he told me what happened, I just panicked and asked, "Are you okay?" And he responded with, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." Wait, no, I'm at the hospital. I referred to him to call the manager when he was back at the store. The phone call was especially memorable as he stated, no joke, that there's butter in them potholes. I think the more unbelievable happenings happened earlier this year with one of our regulars. Dude always stopped by in one of two cars, an SUV or a mom van. This dude always came in asking for $10 on the gas pump. One day, my coworkers and I saw a news story posting noting that there was a warrant out for 3 guys. Their pictures posted, and we recognized them all. One of them was the regular that came in damn near every day. For a while, he didn't come into the store, so we were all convinced. I was working the swing shift when he came in. He asked for $10 on gas, and I rang him up, and he went along his way. I saw he was in the mom van and texted one of my coworkers if I should tell the authorities. By the time I got a response, he was long gone. Later, the graveyard shift came in, and I told her about it. Her response was, "That's impossible. He got caught in a shootout." And I was like, "What?" I literally saw him. She convinced me that it was probably someone similar. Weeks went by, and I saw him a few times. Each time I tried to get one of my coworkers to see him too, but each time he managed to elude them. One coworker nearly saw him, but he crouched down in the driver's seat and drove away. It's been a great mystery this year until recently I brought it up to my manager in passing and without missing a beat. He simply stated, "Oh, that's his twin brother you've been seeing." Story 29. I didn't work there, but was there when it happened. At the time, the employee said, "That's the weirdest crap ever." So I'm here to tell it. A little over 10 years ago, my band was on tour somewhere in Texas or Oklahoma. We were riding along the border, so I don't remember exactly what side the truck stop was on. It was about 3 in the morning in the dead of winter, and I stopped for food while the other guys slept. I was talking to the clerk, waiting for my chimichanga, and this dude walked in, went straight for the bathroom, shower area. About 10 minutes later, dude walks back out, naked with what we can only assume was crap covering his entire front side, like face to ankles full-blown crap mask. Dude walks outside, jumps on the hood of a white car, and walks back in to buy a single Slim Jim stick. The cashier vehemently tells the dude to just take it and go. The guy takes said Slim Jim outside, sticks it inside, and full sprints out of sight. I paid for the chimmy, even though I wasn't going to eat it, and my energy drink and went back to the van just damn befuddled over the whole thing when the singer who's in the passenger seat asks if I saw some naked dude running away. I guess he stopped by the van and asked to borrow some weirdly specific amount of change and ran off before he could answer. Story 30. The worst incident I ever saw, coworker asked if I had any ideas how to flush a turd in the toilet. I was kind of flabbergasted by his question, so I told him break it up with the plunger and get it down. He said he had tried just that and it wouldn't break, so I honestly, against my better judgment, had to see for myself. Damn turd was about twice as big around as a soda can and about 8 inches long and as hard as a damn rock. My question is this: how the duck didn't we see the guy walking out? I mean, seriously. Still, to this day, that image haunts me to the core. Story 31. Worked at a gas station while I was in college. My manager was just a few years older than me and kind of a flirt. We're just casually chatting one day, and he comes across a pile of fecal matter in front of the soda fountain. He asks me why I let someone bring their pet into the store. This was before service dogs were common. I said that I didn't see any pets. He volunteered to pick it up, so I thought I would help by retrieving paper towels from the ladies' room. Returning with the paper towels, my nose matches the smell of the ladies' room with the pile on the floor as I eerily utter, "That isn't dog poop." Best I can tell, an older lady, still in bathroom stall, pooped her pants and it just sort of rolled out as she crossed the store. Story 32. Not my story, but that of a friend who worked at one for decades. Like other people here, he's talked about lot lizards, substances deals, general madness in the parking lot. But once there was this guy who was all of 5'8" and weighed like 100 pounds. Always wearing neon half shirts and biking shorts. Gay as the day is long. He had a habit of creating drama, and the cops were called on him multiple times. One day, my friend walks outside to see this guy licking the door handles of every car in the lot. Straight up, just tonguing them. Someone catches him at it and is chasing him around the lot, screaming he's going to knock his lights out. My friend calls the cops, who are in no rush to deal with this. But in the interim, the liquor and the angry man have disappeared. 20 minutes or so later, the cop shows up. It's often one of 3 cops. Who knocks on the door with his nightstick and says, "Take me to your homos." The friend explains the situation, and the cop raises his hand. "I know who it is, I'll find him." In under 2 minutes, he's in the bathroom banging on the stall doors, screaming in a very stereotyped Irish accent, "Jimmy, it's your old friend Officer McDougal. Yeah, come on out now." Jimmy explodes from out of the last stall, pants around his ankles, screaming in a high-pitched voice. The angry guy from before, Crab, walks out behind him, confused at what's going on. The officer Pepe Le Pew's his way after Jimmy, taking his time. When Jimmy gets to the chain-link fence, he refuses to let go and starts making these insane wailing noises, crying about he won't spend another night in jail. Angry guy is now standing outside, pants still around his ankles, holding his pud. The cop is trying everything in his power to peel this screaming man in a halter top off a fence. A crowd is gathering. The cop looks up at my friend and says with an enormous grin, "I love my job." Story 33. I've been working at a travel stop for the last couple of years. I've seen pretty much everything from PayPal walking around the parking lot in their boxers to a high-speed chase that took out some crepe myrtle trees. But the weirdest, infuriating thing that's happened is I had an older man that started to crap himself halfway up the ramp to the main building. He made a trail of crap from the front door up to the counter, then into the bathroom, and proceeds to walk up and down the bathroom. A couple of times then, he striped down and started to wash the crap out of his clothes in my sink. That's about the time I walk into the bathroom, just doing my normal check, and I see this old man just standing there, letting it hang for everyone to see it. It smells horrible. At this point, I know I'm going to have to shut down the bathroom to clean it properly, so I'm walking around to see how bad it is, and this idiot turns and starts going off on me, saying that I'm laughing at him, and how when I'm older, I'll have to deal with it too. And on, FYI, I haven't said a word the whole time I'm in there. So I leave the bathroom. I'm not going to deal with that, especially when I haven't even looked his way after a bit. He walks out the bathroom. The employee closet is right next to the bathroom door. I'm standing there getting everything ready to clean the crap up. He starts to go off on me again, saying I'm a bad person for making fun of him and all that. He then walks up real close to me looking like he wanted to hit me, so I just stand there and wait for it. All I can smell is nasty crap. He keeps going on and calls me an inbred mother ducker and leaves calling me names the whole time. I've never wanted to hit an old man that much before I hadn't even said a word to him, and he wants to act like that? I told my coworkers that I hope he craps himself again. Oh, and just a side note everywhere, but the bathroom is carpeted in the building. Story 34. This one probably won't get noticed because it's not as crazy, but I'll share anyway. I worked at a pizza restaurant attached to a gas station right off the interstate. On Sunday morning, it was always really slow, so those of us working would make ourselves a breakfast pizza and hang out. One of the girls was facing the gas station side. She suddenly stopped talking, her eyes went wide, and she shot up and ran into the kitchen. The other two employees who were on either side of her turned to look and similarly rushed off. I was facing away, so it took me a few extra seconds to look. There was a large, burly man in a red sequin dress with a clutch handbag and heels. He started walking toward the restaurant. Since the rest of the staff were in the back, laughing loudly enough to hear out front, I calmly took his order. He ordered a meat lover's pizza, and my coworkers sounded like they were going to die of laughter. I somehow managed to act normal about the whole thing. Let him know it would be a few minutes, popped his pizza into the oven, and then went back to inform my coworkers that they were not as sneaky as they thought they were. The fact that the guy was in a full, fancy ensemble wasn't as strange as him acting like any other bro trucker. He wasn't trying to look or act feminine. He was just a dude in a red sequin dress and heels. There was also a situation I wasn't there for, but I saw the video. A guy who was fired for stealing came back and started trying to pick a fight with another employee. The manager, this tiny little 160 centimeters tall lady, came running out brandishing a wooden pizza paddle and screaming. The guy stumbled back, fell over a table, and then ran out the door. The manager thought it was hilarious and gleefully shared it with everyone under the guise of telling us to call the police if he showed up again. Story 35. I used to work at a rest stop restaurant. I was 17 years old at the time, and I have a ton of different stories. There are two that really stand out, though. One, there were these twin men on their 60. They kept telling me how pretty I was and how they would love to have me as their partner. But then one of them said, "If your mom is half as pretty as you are, I'll divorce my wife in a heartbeat." The other said, "If only you were 10 years older, I'd take you into the bathroom, no questions asked." While they were leaving, they failed to tip me and said, "Keep up the great humor, there are a lot of creeps out here. You better watch out." But not us. We were just having some fun with you. 2, it was a midnight shift, and this man came in alone. Not uncommon. Most truckers travel alone. When he was done his meal, he asked me if I liked jokes. Not wanting to be rude, I said yes. He told me to bring over a cloth the next time I came to the table. So I brought him the cloth, and he starts, 4 people walk into a bar, you, a mechanic, a magician, and a pilot. The magician says, "I can make anything rise, watch." Then nothing happens. So the mechanic says, "No, you need to put wings on it." Nothing happens. The pilot says, "No, you need to put a nose on it." Nothing happens. Then I say, "Hold on, I can make anything rise." Then he rolled the cloth so that it created a junk. He laughed. I made an excuse to go to the kitchen. Then I watched him get up to pay, so I took his payment. And as he was leaving, he told me, "You know, you are one sweet-looking thing," then left. Luckily, I never saw any of them again in my remaining time there. But those were some of the most memorable ones. Story 36. I worked for a truck stop for a summer in Montana, circa 1993. What an experience. This gorgeous blonde fills her van and comes to the till to pay. I am behind the counter and she starts flirting with me. I was smitten from the get-go. I go on break and we have coffee together in the lounge. We exchange phone numbers and addresses. She was from Florida. She gets up to leave and runs to the washroom before I return to work. She comes back and gives me this beautiful purple vial, saying it contains something to remember her by until meet again. She hugs and kisses me goodbye. I am over the moon. Later that night, I open the vial and take a whiff of what was sure to be pleasant aroma. Instead, I inhale what must be toxic sludge collected from a public porta potty on a hot in Juarez. The woman calls me a couple days later, and I ask what she put in the vial. She said she defecated in the washroom and gave me a sample of her excrement to remember her by, and it was a very intimate gift in her religion. Gross! Story 37. I'm a tech at a Class 8 truck dealership, which is also right next door to a truck stop, and not a particularly nice one either. The store is also not in a great area of the city. I've seen some interesting things in my career there. I also used to work third shift, so there's no shortage of weird things going on at night. Once spring and summertime rolls around, there's lot lizards walking the truck stop parking lot all night. I've had them try to get in trucks with me when I'd be leaving to take a truck for a road test. One time, a group of them came into the service office, all drunk as crap, and told the foreman they'd line all of us up in the back of the shop and do BJ us all for $20 each. One of my friends told me one night he saw one squatted under a box truck cleaning herself out. There's also no shortage of homeless people on the main road near my job. Probably the most vivid thing I've seen in my time was a homeless man that had crawled underneath a truck in the middle of the night. No one knows why he did it, but when the driver woke up, he didn't do a pre-trip and just decided to leave, not knowing that this homeless guy was laying under his truck. Needless to say, he passed away. The police department was on scene and had put up privacy walls, so people in the parking lot couldn't see it. But they didn't take into account the chain link fence that separates our lot from the truck stop parking lot, and this just so happened to be on the back row, which is right next to the fence, so we could all see it. Some things you just can't unsee. Story 38. Stopped at a Tim Hortons in Bracebridge, Ontario once late at night. This is a regular truck stop right next to the highway with gas stations nearby. This section of Ontario is weird to us Ontarians. It's not southern for us far northern Ontarians, yet it's not north for southern Ontarians. It's not quite modern south, yet not backwoods enough to be really north. Not that northerners are backwards, it's just a stereotype. Anyways, I'm from up near Thunder Bay, which is considered very far north. I stopped in Bracebridge at a Tim Hortons to get some late night coffee. The place was normal looking, but the local people who worked there sounded like characters from the Ozarks. They shouted and argued at each other while 10 feet away from one another. They even spoke in kind of redneck southern US accent. I didn't mind any of it and was nice to everyone, and they seemed good with the customers except with one another, until one of the ladies went into the bathrooms to clean. She went into the men's room, knocking first, put up a sign closing the bathroom, and went to work. 5 minutes later, she pokes her head through the door shouting, "Jard! Jard! Come here! I crapped my pants! I need you to help me!" Jard came along without a care in the world as if this were a regular occurrence. "Oh, come on, Jane! Not again!" And went in to help her as they shouted at each other inside. I was standing in line to make an order. About 5 of us heard and saw all this. We looked at each other, then decided to leave. I wasn't going to get someone who regularly lost control of their bowels to handle my food or drink. It took me years before I stopped again at that particular Tim Hortons. Story 39. I worked at a truck stop once and got a call over my earpiece from maintenance saying they found something bad at one of the diesel pumps. I asked what it was, and he said he'd have to send a picture because he didn't believe it. It was a huge, thick black sex toy, just sitting on the pump. Story 40. One of my coworkers had a gun pulled on him because he opened a can of soda and it made a loud pop that it scared the customer. Had this person accidentally put their car in drive instead of reverse, and they drove into the store. The power went out in the store, and as protocol, we have to evacuate when that happens. We had a customer screaming at the top of her lungs that we were trying to abuse her when we tried to get her to leave the store. A semi-truck driver drove over 2 of our gas pumps because she couldn't turn correctly, and then she fled the scene. Gas was literally spilling everywhere. Luckily, we caught it all on video, so we were able to contact her company and get her to take responsibility for the damages. Story 41. I worked nights at a gas station. Had a regular that would come in once a week. He'd buy a microwave burger, 2 energy drinks, and a handful of adult magazines. Were the energy drinks for before or after? The most disturbing part was that he paid with his dental practice credit card. I could never get the image out of my head of him shotgunning the energy drinks, furiously pleasure himself to all those magazines, then sticking his fingers in unsuspecting patients' mouths. Story 42. This is not my story, but I remember when it happened. It's more of a freaky trucker pulled over to sleep and gets an uninvited guest story than a truck stop rest area story. One very early morning before dawn, someone tries to get a ride from a trucker who has pulled off the highway to rest. The trucker declines to give the man a ride. This genius then decides to climb under the truck and hold on. This trucker heads down 80, through Berkeley, Oakland, and onto 880 South, headed towards San Jose. Sometime just before Hayward, his stowaway falls off. It's still dark. No one can see the guy. so he gets hit repeatedly. All lanes end up being closed. I worked in Hayward at the time, and my normal 30-minute commute was a 3-hour disaster. Story 43. I didn't work at a truck stop, but I have a story. My ex and I were driving back to Central Florida from Atlanta. There was terrible traffic, so we decided to take the back roads until we hit Florida. This happened somewhere in bumduck nowhere, guy. Sun was just setting, so it was light out still but quiet and getting dark. Nothing around but fields of various crops for miles. We're at about a quarter tank, so we decide to stop at the next gas station we see. I stand by the pump while my ex goes in to pay with cash. I hear some muffled yelling. About 30 seconds later, I see her running towards me yelling, "Get the duck in the car!" My ex was generally the scariest thing in any given area, so seeing her like that scared me crapless. We dove into the car and sped away. It takes her a few minutes to calm down enough to explain what she saw. Basically, she walked in there, and the place was trashed. All the shelves were turned over, product all other the floor, no one to be seen, radio still playing. And then she heard screaming and shouting from the back room and bailed. I wish I had a satisfying ending to this, but we never found out what happened. Pretty sure we called the cops, but we didn't even know the street names and we'd sped away too fast to notice landmarks. So I don't know if they found the place, and I didn't know what to look up online to check. Story 44. I am not an employee, but once at a rest stop, I parked and exited my car to have a woman approach me and start screaming in my face that I stole her pet turtle when she wasn't looking a few miles back up the road, and that she had followed me to get it back. I was completely confused and didn't know what to say, but really had to pee, so I went inside and did. When I came back out, she was gone, but my car was covered in napkins with writing on them I couldn't read. I never saw her again. Story 45. I saw a guy on a leash that was tied to a tree. That same trip, there was a hobo going, "Have you seen my dog? He's a good boy." The next rest stop over. I always wondered if the two were connected. Story 46. I worked at a mini Dairy Queen in the truck stop as we all got robbed at gunpoint. I feel like the story is pretty self-explanatory. There were no customers in at the time. This guy walks in with some pistol I couldn't tell you the name of, waving it around like a foam finger. Tells me to empty the register of all the paper money. I stood there blankly, completely unsure of what to do. I politely inform him there's no way for me to open the register without a supervisor code, and I just made minimum wage. He calls me a damn git and tells me to ring up a Blizzard or something and hit cash. I said, oh, okay. He collected his payment from the mini Wens and the convenience portion and just ducked off. The cops took notes, but there was no follow-up. It was only like $350. The gas station part probably had more to offer. Anyway, I quit like a month after that. Story 47. My mate told me a story from when she used to work graveyard shifts at a 24 hours a day McDonald's off a motorway. She used to watch the trucks drive by at night when on break, but one night she saw a person walk onto the median strip on the motorway. This person wore all black, so it was hard for her to see them, but she said she could make out something strung over their shoulder as they crossed the road. My mate watched as this person proceeded to throw this long object over the road way in front of a car where their tires burst after driving over it. She ran into the store and called the police, and it was lucky because there was a police car driving up the motorway towards the store about 1 kilometer away. She told me that the person was found with a 13-inch kitchen knife, and she thinks if she didn't see this person, they were probably trying to carjack people, or worse, by forcing them to pull over. Story 48. This wasn't at a highway rest stop, but a local gas station we stopped at to get ice cream. It is listed as a safe place for children. While sitting outside eating ice cream with my kids, an officer walks up and says she had a call to pick up children from the parents, and were we them? Not thinking. I made a joke that no, but she could take mine if she wanted. We had a little more banter. She goes in the store, walks around the parking lot a bit, and then leaves. After the fact, I remember seeing a family I thought was lingering, strangely, and had driven off just before. I guess these things happen more often than I would have ever imagined. Story 49. You get desensitized working at gas stations after a while from crap you see. Seen substances, deals, people gamble away life-saving, plus rent on lottery tickets. A few girls take a crap on the side of the building at night. Guys and girls peeing on the pumps in broad daylight. Drunk girl pissing in the middle of the store during morning rush hour. Homeless people fighting for turf. Guy was so high he hit the building trying to park. He came for snacks. A few beer runs. A customer shot a robber who had a fake gun. A few girls flashing me. An 18-wheeler crashed into the building because he didn't see it. My favorite. A guy stole a truck, backed into the building, crashing through the wall, and struggled to get the chain around the ATM. After a bit, he panicked, jumped back into the truck, and took off speeding, and ditched the truck a few blocks away. The poor night guy pressed the silent alarm button and hid behind the counter the whole time. I came in 2 hours after it happened and saw the tape. Had to help clean up the mess. Store had a hole on the wall covered by plastic for 2 weeks. Night guy quit that night. Story 50. Not shocking, but always remembered it. Big trucker climbs out of his semi-truck cab, turns around petting and talking to something saying, Now you be good and protect the truck. A chicken jumps onto his dashboard. Story 51. When I was in college, one of my relatives hooked me up with a job over Christmas break as the overnight custodian at a rest stop on the interstate. It was easy money. I would sit in the office from midnight to 8 a.m. and read books and play Game Boy. I only had to come out, it locked, to check the cleanliness of the place once an hour. Anyway, the story of gay roadside hookups is so true. This was in the mid-90s, way before the internet. I had a peephole in my office that looked out into the lobby. All night, dudes just hanging out waiting for other dudes. I assume they went back to their cars after meeting because no funny business actually happened in the lobby or restrooms that I'm aware of. Anyway, long story short, I would spend hours looking out my peephole watching gay dudes cruise for other gay dudes. Fun times. Story 52. Not an employee, but one time I went to those public bathrooms at a rest stop and saw that one of the toilets was full to the brim with crap. I have no damn clue how that was achieved, but it's safe to say, I go to fast food restaurant bathrooms now. Story 53. In high school, I worked as a fuel attendant at a truck stop. It wasn't unusual to see drivers at that time high on speed. At any rate, per the fuel ticket, I am filling up the passenger side tank, and this little person, maybe 4 feet tall, comes around the front of his Peterbilt clearly tweaking, and had evidently decided he's waited long enough. He pulled the dispenser out of the tank and tossed it on the ground, still locked on pumping diesel. Story 54. There was one instance where I was working one night, and this family of 4 or 5 came in. Adult kids with aging parents. They milled about the store, used the bathroom and whatnot, and were getting ready to leave when the mom came up to my counter. Ghost Riders by Johnny Cash had been playing on the loudspeaker for a few minutes. She looks me in the face and says, "I was just in the bathroom." And you know the part in this song where he goes Ghost Riders in the sky? I was in the bathroom stall, and during that part I could swear I heard something move in the stall next to me, but I was in there alone. I think it was the ghost of Johnny Cash. All I could think was this lady has seen Walk the Line too many times or something. I was honestly just dumbfounded. Story 55. Not an employee, but one of my favorite stories I've gathered in a long life comes from a truck stop. Another soldier in my platoon was a truck driver before he joined the army, and my favorite story he told me was when he was parked across from a line of trucks at a truck stop in the Midwest. He watched a lot lizard, truck stop prostitute, jump out of one guy's truck and walk over to a mud puddle where she squatted over it and proceeded to wash herself for about 10 seconds. Then headed over to the next guy's truck and jumped in. About 15 minutes later, she did the same thing. He sat there eating his truck stop dinner, watching her work her way all the way down the line, all the while using the same mud puddle in between each truck. To this day, I don't know why, but that image is so vivid of her squatting over that mud puddle. Story 56. Not an employee, but one time a friend and I walked into a rest area bathroom late one night. We were traveling from Dallas to Collins, we were in Kansas and in the middle of nowhere. Empty parking lot save for a few cars. We walked into the men's room and stumbled into what had to be a big-time substances deal. 7 well-dressed but shady-looking dudes in a circle facing each other. There was a briefcase. Me and my friends stop immediately. They're looking at us. We're looking at them. We then walk over to the urinals. In our fear, it just seemed like we should just play it off. Be cool. We're obviously not cops. We were a couple of dirty long hairs in butthole surfer t-shirts and smelled like substances. I've never been so scared taking a leak in my entire life. I swear I thought we were going to be beat in the back of our heads. We pissed in Get Fo. I know what you're going to ask. No, I did not wash my hands. Story 57. Not really bizarre, I guess, but it was pretty funny to me. So I started working at this truck stop, gas station, and when I was still fairly new there, I believe I worked there for a month or so, a man comes in, points a gun at me and tells me to give him all the money in the register. I just thought to myself, nah man, this is not really happening. I started mumbling something, and the guy just started to laugh and told me it is a fake gun. He knows all the staff and knew I had to be new there, so he wanted to prank me. I had a good laugh with the guy, told this to my manager, and she was pretty mad and they wanted to call the cops, but I don't think they ever did. Story 58. I used to work at a truck tire shop in college for my beer money. I was in charge of keeping the warehouse stocked and organized. When we'd get shipments in of tires, you'd have to stack them by doing kind of a hang clean and flip type motion with the tire to throw it onto the stack without absolutely damn your back up. Anyhow, we'd often get in a shipment of knockoff crafty tires from India, and every once in a while, you'd be flipping and stacking those tires, and a damn big snake fresh off the boat from India would fall out of the tire and onto you, and I'd nearly crap my pants every time it happened. I damn hate snakes. Some of the guys would freeze them, and they'd put that frozen snake in one of the guys' truck to scare them. What of a job that was. Story 59. I used to work at a grocery gas station in a crafty town an hour outside of Seattle. You'd get the occasional weirdo or homeless tweaker wandering around, but one day an older lady came in and she was in a different damn dimension, babbling to herself and wandering around the gas station in circles looking at the sky. I called the store and they said the cops were already on the way. They came and she didn't resist when they took her. I asked my girlfriend at the time what happened because she worked in the main store. Apparently, this lady came in and wandered through the store, lifting up her shirt repeatedly like she was fanning herself, flashing saggy baggies at random shopgoers the whole time. The most backstory I ever got on the situation was apparently her sister came to the store to apologize and said she gets like this when she's on her medicine. Take that how you will. Story 60. I don't work at a rest stop, but I do have a story. I was at a really dirty rest stop. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a few months. The restroom was caked in piss. There wasn't any paper towels, and the hand dryers didn't work. It was one of those places where it was so dirty that you could get infected with a couple of new diseases that haven't been discovered yet just by thinking about it. I saw someone walk barefoot with open sores on his feet. Story 61. I worked for a long-haul trucking company 20 years ago. The story I heard from the vice president recruiting, driver management, was a driver had got some lot lizards who also had some needles, and when he refused to pay, they shot him with an overdose of it and he passed away. Now, this was somewhere in Southern California in the summer and before GPS. The driver was in the truck for 2 weeks until the heat and time caused him to swell and finally burst, leaking out the side of the truck. Cops were called, investigation done, etc. They had to send a guy down there to get the truck, try to get it cleaned, and drive it back the 1,200 miles to the main terminal. They said the guy they sent was a bit off himself and would eat and drink in the truck while the windows were down trying to air it out. Story 62. My stepfather was a correctional officer who was transporting prisoners from facility to facility 20 years ago when the bus stopped at a rest stop. During a sweep of the bathroom, he found a flip phone. He secured it and processed the inmates in and out of the can when the phone rang. The phone's owner identified himself as Chuck Mangione and asked if they could meet up at the next throughway exit, and they did. Mr. Mangione got his phone back. Story 63. I worked at a truck stop kind of in Oklahoma. What story do you want? The 85 pounds elderly man with a Brooklyn accent who would come in with his multiple wives to shower at the same time, who were all fatties and called him Pappy. I still remember his trucking company's name. We had a couple drunks drive through the store. I have had a tweaker yell at me while subsequently spitting an actual tooth out of his mouth at me. Had one's trucker reach in his pocket to get change and pulled out a set of dentures, not his own, but some he found in vegans said they were his good luck charm. I have been cussed at, spit at, found substances, and the amount of people who will poop in a public bathroom sink, shower, or hallway would amaze you. Story 64. Worked night shift at a truck stop in eastern Quebec in the early 90s. Tiny place. Little section for the cash and oil product on shelves on slat walls. 2 truckers, male, come in and ask for a shower. They both pay and go to it. The showers are right behind the wall with the shelves of oil and things. Within 3 minutes, the banging against the wall got so intense, the shelves literally fell to the floor. When they came out afterwards, I asked them if the shower went well and politely asked for help to pick up the shelves, which they did. Story 65. Greyhound bus, early 2000. Had a guy that was a little off. Substances or some mental problems, maybe both. He decided to pull a knife out and start stabbing the seat in front of him. Luckily, there was no one in that seat. Also glad it wasn't a packed bus. He stayed in his area, just kept mumbling to myself. We were already on the road, so I kept an eye on him to make sure he stayed in his area until he fell asleep. Once he did, I notified the driver. Wasn't long after that, we pulled into an area with cops waiting. It wasn't my first run-in with someone off their normal self. I knew enough not to draw extra attention or agitate him further. Story 66. I used to work at a gas station quite close to the city, and a lot of tourists came in high. One guy even lost his keys inside. He found them in the freezer next to the ice cream. 7. I had 2 dudes come in during my early morning shift. They come straight up to the till and say, "Give me all your money." I'm still not sure if they were joking, but at the time, my response was, "No?" They looked at each other, and the one who spoke before shrugs and goes, "All right then," laughs with his buddy and leaves without purchasing anything. Not really scary or anything, just really confusing because they literally didn't buy anything. Not diesel, gas, or food in the store itself. Story 68. Worked at a truck stop and had to chase an addicted out of our women's room. A girl had come up to me and told me that the woman was cleaning herself with the stall wide open. This woman was significantly less attractive than you are imagining. Also, one time a lady came in with a monkey on her shoulder, which was odd, but the monkey was well behaved. Story 69. I'm not an employee, but I'm on the road quite a bit. Been propositioned a couple times, always in Utah of all places. I thought to myself last week, I bet I'm the only guy on the road traveling this highway right now with birds. Next truck stop, guy filling up next to me is also traveling with birds. I tend to drive at night and early morning, so maybe more interesting stuff happens during the day. Story 70. I worked at a Dunkin' Donuts at a rest stop when I was in high school. One Saturday, I worked an 8-hour overnight, and during my meal break, I went outside to have a smoke. Instead of staying right by the back door, I went over to some picnic tables. As I walked over there, I noticed faint lights in the woods. I walked closer, and saw 6 guys with their junk out, surrounding a naked, chubby, middle-aged woman and a naked fat guy. Story 71. I worked at a truck stop in East Tennessee for a summer. We kept getting reports of an escort lizard, an escort that works truckers, but we could never catch her. Turned out the escort lizard was one of our employees, and her madam was another one who would sit in her car with a radio on her brakes, setting up the meetings. Story 72. Cops used to hang around the stop I worked at in high school. We were told to comp them coffee and sandwiches, but I'd give the cigarettes too. One of my regulars gave me a very good piece of advice. He told that I should never hit the silent alarm while a robbery was going on. He said that it is never good to have a dude pointing a gun at you when the popo show up. You'd end up passed away or a hostage. Let them leave and get a license plate number. Story 73. Not an employee, but I'm a driver. I was in line at a truck stop Subway and the guy in front of me ordered a turkey bacon ranch with no turkey or bacon, but extra ranch. Seeing a man chomp down on a ranch and cheese sandwich hurt me internally. Story 74. I had a trucker who always hit on me and told me he wanted to take me to Kenya. I politely declined each time. Turns out Kenya was the name of his truck. Truck drivers of Reddit, what's your most disturbing truck stop story? Story 1. I reckon I have a tale for you. It isn't strictly about a stop, but it started there. Now, some folks would say I'm a trucker, but that isn't true in the strictest sense of the word. Isn't got called to be hauling goods for established merchants and the like, and they isn't got the notion to hire independent contractors, what with having their own fleets and all. Still, I've got my own rig, bought and paid for in full, and I'm beholden to nothing save the needs of Mother Nature. That's food and water to folks in houses. My cabin is my home. Every so often I find myself in need of some cash, so I'll take a load from someone who might not be entirely honest. Truth is, if the money's good, I'm not one to look sideways at it. My rule is to keep from asking questions. There was one fellow who struck me as being a bit on the odd side, though, to the point that I couldn't help but wonder about his unspoken intentions. Met him at a rest stop, and I tell you, ain't nobody ever looked so out of place. He was a young, fresh-faced guy who was willing to pay handsomely for delivery of this shiny metal crate to some far-flung city or another. The weird thing about it was that he wanted to come along for the ride. I've ferried my share of hitchers, but there isn't been one of them before or since that wanted to bring along that kind of cargo. Like I said, though, the money he was offering was too good to pass up, and I was in fair need of it. He hopped aboard and we kicked into gear, ready to make the long haul. For a while, nothing seemed out of sorts until I got the notion to check on the cargo. Don't misunderstand, I wasn't snooping. I was just making certain that nothing was amiss in the hold. So you can imagine my surprise when that crate went and popped open, and there was a naked girl inside. I tell you, it was a mighty strange sight, and no more settling when the fellow caught me looking over his cargo. I told him straight out that I wasn't one for kidnapping and that I wanted no part in whatever unkindness his was fixing to perpetrate. That's when he told me that the girl was his sister and that the Alliance had been messing with her brain. Long story short, the kid wound up staying on as my ship's doctor, and he saved the lives of me and my crew more times than I can count. Story 2. I started to speed up and slow down just to get a good look. This, in hindsight, was a huge mistake. I finally caught up and saw this man with his pants and underwear completely missing. I couldn't stop staring as I looked at his hairy ass lifted up off of the seat. His junk was hard as marble and was barely visible above his big, fat, nasty gut. His seat was covered in the mussed putrid green and brown slurry of crap. Some real primo muck. He had in his hand a bottle of cheap-ass Colt 45 beer. Only it wasn't beer that was filling the bottle, it was something much worse. Finally, he saw me in the mirror. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the most horrible and wretched truth. That clearly deranged and ducked up man was me. Elle was watching myself in the rearview mirror. As I realized this, I couldn't help but pull the bottle up to my nose and give it a good long sniff. The smell of your own brand is always the most satisfying and intoxicating. I quickly hit the cabin air recirculate button on the dash and continued on through Nebraska in the only way I knew how to get through the state. Story 3. Walked into the restroom in Nowhere, Nevada to see a guy furiously pleasure himself while maintaining intense eye contact with himself. Never broke eye contact when I walked in, then slowly backed out. Story 4. Not a trucker, but I was at a rest stop once in the bathroom that was packed with people, and there was some kid absolutely blasting out of his a hole in the stall, and some guy came in and yelled, "Hey, Chucky, you okay in there?" The kid responded with no, and then continued blasting flames out. Everyone just kind of looked around at each other in silent shock of what just happened. Story 5. Not a truck driver, but hitchhiked with one once. She was a big older lady, and I am adult man, so I felt safe. She starts telling me this story about an accident she saw once. On that very night, 10 years ago, along the same stretch of road in a dense fog just like the one that night. She saw the worst accident she'd ever seen. There was this sound, like a garbage truck dropped off the Empire State Building, and when they finally pulled the driver's body from the twisted. And then her face all contorted into some demonic creature, and then back again to normal. She dropped me off at a truck stop and told me to tell them that Large Marge sent me. Story 6. Most of the time, if you mind your own business, no one bothers you. A lot of the big chain truck stops keep the lot lizards out because they also want to be the travel stops for families. And if mom and the kids see a bunch of escort hanging around, they don't want to stop and spend their money there. Bums can be a problem. Truck stops attract people wanting something for nothing. There are some around big cities that are bad places. The truck stops along I-20 south of Dallas, as an example. I have stopped in those and had people banging on the truck all night. Either lot lizards who looked like they were mostly dead from substances or bums wanting to get money for their substances fix. I just don't stop at those anymore. I'll drive 40 miles out of town to avoid one if I have to stay over in the area. The most disturbing thing I can think of was where a truck and trailer cut a corner to close, and the trailer hit the front of a parked truck. The trailer's brakes were on fire, and it burned up that tractor. 2 other tractors parked next to it and the trailer. I could not find out if everyone got out all right. They were cleaning it up when I saw it. Story 7. I almost got my ass kicked at a truck stop. Truck stops have showers in restaurants. You get free shower tickets sometimes if you are gassing up or getting some work done on your truck. I was in the packed restaurant, taking a break from going cross-country loading and unloading boxes on our semi. I finished breakfast with the driver, and he left me some money on the table to buy some food from the shop for the trip. He went off to take a shower. I hung out and finished my meal and grabbed the money off the table. The table next to me was full of big Western trucker guys, and they stand up and shoot me daggers with their eyes. "That's cold, man," one guy says to me. "They act like they are about to beat my ass." I am nothing but confused. It turns out they thought I was taking the waitress tip that the driver had left for her, but in reality, it was our snack and drinks money. Once that was cleared up, all was okay, but for a moment, I almost crap out my pancakes and home fries right there. Story 8. Not a trucker. I was driving back to uni from home. I've been working all day and was around 1:30 a.m. I was shattered. Thought I'd pull into Motorway services and have an hour nap before I continued on the trip. Pulled into services. As soon as I parked up, looked up, straight in front of my car on otherwise of car park, between 2 trucks, was a car with the driver door open. One of the guys was bent over with his trousers down getting ducked. Story 9. I used to work at a 24-hour weigh station for trucks that was out in the middle of nowhere. Anytime anything over 100 pounds got on our scale, the computer would light up bright with the exact weight, and an alarm would go off letting us know we needed to get the scale ticket. One night, at around 3 in the morning, there were just 2 of us in the booth facing away from the scale. The alarm goes off and my coworker turns to see the weight, which was 145 pounds. A deer, maybe? We check the camera and notice a tall, frail man in nothing but ripped underwear walking on the scale like a zombie. I immediately call for the police. The man creeps over to our booth window and proceeds to slowly bash his head against the glass. This went on for at least 5 minutes until 2 state troopers arrived to detain him, but not after he left us a gift of saliva on the glass. We would later find out that he was under the influence of substances. Story 10. I install DS in hotels along the Northwest, so when we go on the road, truck stops are one of the regular spots we fuel up at and get road sodas, beers, and snacks. We pull up at a TS, and I had already had all my supplies for our trip. I pull out my handheld CB to see if I could catch anyone chatting. Totally heard what sounded like 2 truckers getting ready to duck. "Hey man, you lonely?" "Yeah, come on over to my truck and we'll get busy for a moment." After that, I didn't hear anything. 11. If you would care for a good truck stop story. My mom was a waitress in a truck stop. My dad was there with his friends hanging out. He asked her to marry her the first time he saw her. This December will be 52-year anniversary. Story 12. Not a big rig, but a half-ton pickup. I was driving through the prairies and I stopped to pick up a hitchhiker. After I stopped, the guy was clearly hammered and he had a bigger, older dude who was hiding in a bush and also drunk as a skunk. It was a regular cab and I didn't feel comfortable, so I said no and they got angry. I peel out, but the younger guy jumped in the bed. I drove down the road like 1 kilometer and stopped to kick the guy's ass. But he stole my fishing rod and ran away.